Welcome everyone to this Community of Practice event today. If everyone can hear me, can I get a thumbs up? There we go, thank you. Great. All right, so good morning to all of our esteemed partners, our panelists and our guests. Welcome to this next installment of our ResMBID Community of Practice series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea Fludiotis, and I'm the Program Manager for the Marine Biodiversity Portfolio at the Resilient Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity Program, ResMBID. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our partners, the 12 Caribbean overseas countries and territories, of course, the European Union as the donor of the program, having made available financing required for the program. Expertise France as the lead program implementation partner, the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery and the World Bank as the implementation partner with delegated responsibility for the disaster risk financing and insurance technical assistance component of ResMBID. Before I carry on, just some brief comments on housekeeping, please. I'll ask that all mics be muted, please, to avoid any feedback or background noise. It's optional for you to keep your video on, but I would ask our panelists to please keep theirs on, especially when presenting. And then lastly, we will be taking questions both in the chat box and verbally during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So when we get to the Q&A session, if you want to ask your question in person, please just raise your hand and I'll get to each person in turn. Right, so this is the first Community of Practice event for 2023. We are continuing with the series that we started in 2021. And these events are intended to facilitate discussions on the projects under implementation through ResMBID, foster and strengthen the ResMBID community, identify opportunities for ResMBID community to further engage with each other and build on the experiences of the now 47 projects that we have undergo in the program. And today we are featuring the Marine Biodiversity Portfolio. I'm sure many of you know that it's been an exciting time for marine biodiversity so far this year. Just last month, the United Nations member countries agreed upon the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, headlined as the High Seas Treaty, which will be the first international law to offer protection to nearly 2/3 of the ocean that is beyond national control. This came on the heels of the landmark agreement last year that aims to protect at least 30% of the planet's land and water by 2030, the so-called 30 by 30 goal. And at COP27 in November last year, there was the Mangrove Breakthrough Plan that was launched, and that also aims to secure the future of 15 million hectares of mangroves globally by 2030. Of course, these are all very important high-level initiatives, but they wouldn't have come about, nor can they succeed, without the tireless work being done every day by the individuals and organizations like those that are leading the charge on marine biodiversity conservation in the 12 Caribbean OCTs within our program. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our 4 panelists who will be sharing some of their experiences with us today. First up, we have Mr. Martin Keeley, who's the director of the Mangrove Education Project in the Cayman Islands, and he'll be presenting on the project Coastal Ecosystems Education Guide and Program. Then we have Jessica Johnson. She's a project manager working with Stinapa in Bonaire, and she'll be presenting on the project Realizing a Blue Economy on Bonaire, Restoring Marine Biodiversity and Promoting Sustainable Recreation in Lac Bay. Then we have dual panelists presenting on a project in Aruba. We have Mr. René Henkens, who's a scientist and project manager at Wageningen Environmental Research in the Netherlands, and Ms. Natasha Silva, who's the Chief Conservation Officer at the Aruba National Parks Foundation. And they'll be presenting on the project Turning the Tide, Maintaining Economic Resilience on Aruba through hands-on restoration and conservation of its marine biodiversity. Martin, you're up for your presentation. Is everything up and running on your end now?
It's up and running, thanks.
Great. Okay, so without further ado, let's go to that. Sorry, I heard someone else. Yes. Anthony,
okay.
Are you okay?
You can hear me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Anthony. Good to see you. Okay, Martin, we're all yours.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so that tells you what it is. It's a coastal education and guide and program, and we go to the next slide. Okay, marine biodiversity. I'm sure we've all got the same lead-in slides. Thank you. Next one. Next slide. Okay. No, that's right. So basically, we're going to talk about how the program developed, how it evolved, and track it all the way through. And basically, you're seeing some of the results of some students here who are part of the program. Anyway, back to the beginning. Next slide. Okay, so it all goes back to Marvelous Mangroves program, which we launched in 2001 in the Cayman Islands, and was introduced here following a previous program we developed in the Pacific Northwest in conjunction with teachers and scientists. The Boundary Bay program was for the temperate wetlands, and we adapted that program for use in mangroves. It took us a couple of years, but that's where we got from there. The whole concept behind the original programs and behind Marvelous Mangroves was not to come in and say, here, wave us around, you have to do this. It was to work with teachers and the Ministry of Education to incorporate the program into particularly the Year 5 curriculum. And so that was also the process behind continuing and still continues. So every school in the islands has this part of their curriculum. And again, as with the previous program in the Pacific Northwest, there were a lot of hands-on activities, basically because that's the way you learn if you're a kid. So I think that covers that. Next slide, please. Okay, once we got the program going in Cayman, I then took the program through the Mangrove Action Project, which I joined in '98, around the world. And that entailed working with different nonprofits and government agencies and para-government agencies in different countries around the world to not just adapt and to translate the program for their own school system and their own education programs, but also their own flora and fauna, because each was different. Here's a few covers that I managed to flip up. We're in 17 countries now, and the program continues in the majority of those countries, which I've been working in for, as I say, for over 20 years. A lot of the people still connect with each other in different languages, and some have disappeared into the woodwork. So right now we figure well over 250,000 students and 250,000 teachers, and we are still looking to continue to expand the program. However, we're going to expand it through, next slide, please, the Coastal Lagoon program. Okay, so what we wanted to do was connect the three ecosystems because of course they're interdependent, and we wanted to tie in seagrass and reefs and to pull them all together. In order to do that, we followed the same process as we did with Marvelous Mangroves. We took each ecosystem, went into it in depth, and provided a series of resources in the book to be able to educate the teachers into what they're teaching, as well as providing them with a series of background materials on each ecosystem. And we trimmed down the number of activities because we felt maybe 100 was... Anyway, The program changed somewhat because of teaching conditions in different countries. I needed a full week to introduce a new program to each country I was in, at least a full week with the first teacher workshop. And usually took at least a couple of years, for example, to get the Chinese program or the Bangladesh program going, to go through the translation process, etc. Well, we're hoping and planning through my other organization, the Mangrove Action Project, to be able to again expand the Coastal Lagoon program around initially the Caribbean region and then internationally, again building on the whole Marvelous Mangroves program, because we already have established people to work with around the world. However, going back to what we have just published this last month or so is our 200-page teacher's guide with all of the various activities outlined and all the various supportive materials. Okay, so let's concentrate on that. Next slide. Okay, so why are we doing it? We're doing it for different reasons, obviously. Initially for the students, because unless they are doing practical hands-on activities, most of them don't learn anything. So the programs have to be science-based, obviously, but they also community-based and sociologically based. And we do a program in each class, and we do this with the teachers as well, integrate with the teachers, to go through exactly the specific details of the different locations, different areas in the Coastal Lagoon. We do practical hands-on activities. For example, the guys in the middle or bottom are checking out black mangrove leaves for salt extrusion. The kids up top, they're doing a seagrass search, where we go in with dip nets and see what we can find. Top right, again, we do minimal restoration. There's enough people on the planet doing restoration, in my opinion. There's not enough people doing this kind of education. We feel there should be more. So we work with schools on different projects. Can you go back, please? Work with schools on different projects, like top right, to do little mini restoration programs which we tie into the whole school program. Bottom left, we have microscopes. We started this out with Marvelous Mangroves. Every country we went into, we took microscopes, and we do that with every class and every school here. We have about 24 microscopes, and we take those with us into the classroom. All the teachers can order them. Bottom right, one of the middle school students doing a reef study. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we just finished our first series of teacher workshops, close to 50 teachers in 3 specific programs. Our schools have grown extensively. Again, the programs are involved working with the teachers, explaining how the activities work. The bottom middle, you can see the teachers working on an activity. We try to do maybe 3 or 4 activities, depending on time, which we have the teachers work through with us when we're doing the program and when we're doing the workshop. Okay. Bottom left, the teachers, we want them usually to come out on the field trips with us. We feel field trips are absolutely essential. And so we insist that the teachers come with us, and they like to be with us just because of the control factor. Right-hand picture is one of our teachers from Cayman Brac, where I'm from, Miranda, going out with the seagrass activity. And on the top is just the last group of teachers from our workshop, and of course the ReSembed banner. Okay, so you're doing it for the teachers, providing them with the resources, the background information, and the training so they can do it in the classroom. We will also go into the classrooms as well, of course. Okay, next slide. Okay, we do this is where we take communities, different parts of the communities, particularly in Grand Cayman, but we do some on Cayman Brac, where we take them into the central mangroves, and we teach them about mangroves, mangrove ecology. Again, it's a field trip exploration. We don't do classroom work this way. We do an introductory, sort of sit around and sort through this, and this is what we're going to show you, and then there's more follow-up with that later. Bottom left is one of the older community members getting lost in the mangroves, and on the top you will see us conducting a mixture of young people and with one of our mangrove rangers on the left. Okay, mangrove rangers, next slides. So when we set this up, and we started this program a little before we received our recent mid funding, and this is extended and enabled us to finish it. We started during the COVID lockdown, where we had problems with finding, doing anything, as we all did. So here you've got the teachers, not teachers, sorry, here you've got the mangrove rangers. We train mangrove rangers to not only help us with teaching, but also help us with the community outreach and working through the whole program of getting people in the community and the schools aware of some of the difficulties we face, particularly in Grand Cayman, where we were having problems. And you'll see, again, the rangers go through similar program training. We do underwater exploration. Again, we do through microscopic exploration of water from the mangroves, and we tend to go out on boat and do look at what's around, dig around, find out what's around. Here's a Cassiopeia exploration on the right-hand slide. And the idea we also have a junior ranger club, which is based on the concept of a Marine Scouts or Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, where we have young junior rangers, and that's the top slide there. And we take them on explorations, the same with the mangrove rangers. The mangrove rangers also help us out with the teaching itself. So they will come into the classrooms with us and also help us with the field trips, both the community field trips and the school field trips. And the mangrove rangers, we've tried to create a template so the whole program is easily introduced to other organizations, initially in the OCTs, and again down the road internationally. Okay, planet Earth, why we're always doing this, okay? Planet Earth, next slide. Oh, well, let's do our, let us first do our website. All right, so because, of course, everybody's gone slide and everybody's gone screen mad, and because, again, COVID introduced the same problem, is everybody was relying on their laptops and everything else. We've introduced a new website which goes through the whole program, and you can sign up as a teacher, and once you sign up as a teacher, the main part of it is open to everybody. If you sign up as a teacher, then it gives you all sorts of extra resources, all right? These are the resources that we've developed over the last year or so. Everything from PowerPoints to access to the actual Coastal Lagoon Guide itself, although we are giving published copies to the teachers in Cayman. And the original Marvelous Mangroves program, lots of videos of different aspects of the Coastal Lagoon ecosystem. And then more important than anything else is that one of our rangers is our videographer, and Iliane has her own videography company, and she has been videotaping all of our programs as we go along, and you can see some of those on our websites. And there's one here where we also decided that it's no good just doing the workshop, it's no good just going into classes. If the teachers wanted to do activities, because there's plenty of schools here, we would go and create specific how to do the activities, so how-to videos, which I would like you to click on, and that's what Ilian is videographing here with again another of our rangers.
For this activity, you will need paper towels or rags for cleanup, paper plates, plastic straws, a section of a banana, toothpicks, jam, a scissors or a knife, sour candy or licorice candy cut into 1-inch pieces, or pretzel sticks for younger students. Also, use gummy worms candy, sugar sprinkles, round crackers, and oyster crackers, and a coral polyp handout. In this activity, the polyp can be made by each student. You will need to increase the amount of each item depending on how many students you have. Ask the students, how many of you think coral is a plant? How many of you think coral is an animal? Corals are animals. Go over some of the big differences between plants and animals. Show students the coral polyp overhead transparency or printed copy and discuss all of the labeled parts: tentacles, mouth, gut, skeleton, and zooxanthellae. The illustration shows the basic components of coral polyps. Although the skeleton sits underneath the polyp in this illustration, the skeleton is actually outside the polyp itself, and the polyp can contract and retract inside the calcium carbonate skeleton for protection. Tell students they are going to do a very cool activity, making an edible coral polyp. Put a slice of banana on a paper plate. Then make a hole, the mouth, in the top half of the banana with a straw. Be careful not to go all the way through the banana, as coral polyps have 1 hole, not 2. Next, create 6 holes with a toothpick surrounding the central mouth. Then poke 6 candy straws, or Twizzlers, or gummy worms, which will be sliced and they will play the role of tentacles, into the holes. Then add sprinkles to the banana. These will be the zooxanthellae. Add a round cracker and jam to the base of a banana. The coral is attached to the substrate. Add oyster crackers around the base, which is a calcium carbonate skeleton. Students then place individual coral polyps together to form a colony. Now, eat your polyp.
Okay, so those short how-to activities, we've done about 7 or 8, and we've got a few more to go. So this is why we're doing it. This is a central mangrove wetland in Grand Cayman. It's the largest contiguous mangrove wetland in the entire Caribbean. It's 8,600 acres. And it's under threat. Parts of it are protected, parts of it are not. It is under threat because of the insane development that is going on the Big Island. And I just wanted to finish this and conclude my presentation with this very short video, which says it all, why we're doing this. Okay, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Martin. That was wonderful. Some visuals to see at the end, and I wish we were doing this in person so we could all build and eat our coral polyps. Hopefully next time.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
Some very interesting points that came out. I've got a few notes here, but I'm sure everyone else maybe took some notes, so hopefully something we can discuss in the Q&A session. Right, next we'll hand over to Jessica to present on the project happening in Bonaire. Jessica, we're all yours.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, my name is Jessica Johnson. I'm calling in today from Bonaire, which is a Dutch Caribbean island in the South Caribbean. And I work for STNAPA, which is the National Parks Foundation here. Our project, it has kind of a lengthy title, but what we're focusing on is marine biodiversity and sustainable recreation in Loch Bay. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Loch Bay is an important area for the island because it hosts our largest mangrove forest, actually the largest mangrove forest within the entire Dutch Caribbean. It's also an important recreational area. This is really popular for windsurfers, snorkelers, swimmers, divers. Any given day, you can go to the bay and it's packed with people. And in addition to people, it also is very ecologically important. So we are very aware of our impact on the turtle population and the queen conch population, which are both protected species, which are present in this area. So next slide, please. So the issue is that we have this area of vast ecological, economical, and cultural importance for the islands, but the seagrass is unprotected. We have people with faulty septic tanks that are leaking right into the bay. So we have degrading water quality, which is therefore affecting the coral, seagrass, and mangroves. Plus, we have an issue with recreational user conflict. So we've had to create zones of use, which is part of something we'll discuss today. So next slide, please. So our goal is to create a project which can improve the natural habitats. We can get a better idea for our baseline data by monitoring overall water conditions. We can create a sustainable recreational use, and then we can also improve the Park Authority enforcement, because for a long time, the Park Authority, this is kind of on the other side of the island from where the Park Authority usually operates. So part of the goal was to improve the footprint of the park there. Next slide, please. So the Loch Pa Semper project was created. So Loch Pa Semper in the local language means loch for always. So the idea is that we want to protect what we have now so that it will be available for future generations. And this has been broken down into 5 strategies. So next slide, please. 4 of the 5 strategies are directly related to this RESEMBID project. So these have to do with restoring the marine habitats, sustainable recreation, improved enforcement, and improved water quality. In addition to these 4 other, we also have local government has contributed to sargassum management because of the way that this bay is positioned. It is also very vulnerable to sargassum influxes. So this makes up the 5th element of the project. And next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now is go through the 4 steps that are related to the RESEMBID project, give you a very high overview of it, and then if there's questions, we can go into that during the Q&A session. But when we were designing the first part, which is for the marine habitats, we really were focusing on 2 out of the 3 main habitats in this area. This is coral and seagrass. The reason my mangroves have been left out of this project is because they're covered in a complementary project. And I'm actually the project coordinator for both. So that allows us to integrate the 2 projects together to make sure the whole area is covered. So through RESEMBID, we are protecting seagrass by both outplanting seagrass as well as protecting existing seagrass beds. This is done through signage, through floating lines to prohibit people from coming in. We also use a new 3D biodegradable structure you can see in the bottom picture for the seagrass outplanting. So it's these sheets that click together. You can put the seagrass in between, and then you bury the whole unit under the sand, and it gives the seagrass stability until it can grow its own roots. And this has been very successful. We also built a brand new coral nursery in the bay, which already has over 400 corals in it. This is from 10 different genotypes, but we've collected corals from around the island, brought them into this nursery, and the goal is in another 2 years, once they're mature enough, we can outplant them to kind of backfill the back reef of the bay. One of the important things I want to bring up in this section is that we have a lot of local expertise that traditionally do these kind of projects. But one of the goals of this Resembid project was to bring the Marine Park Rangers, which have traditionally had more of an enforcement role, and give them the authority, the knowledge, the capacity to monitor these projects themselves. So this is quite unique because we've taken the Marine Park Rangers and made them scientists and habitat restorians, and they've really taken to it. And it's a really great way to empower a group of people that wouldn't normally be in habitat restoration to give them that authority. So that's actually been very successful. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and then the impacts that this project has had is just directly increasing the amount of available habitats. We are testing new coral propagation techniques for the island, which is really exciting. And yeah, using a novel seagrass outplanting technique, using these bees, which is the biodegradable engineering system. All right, next slide, please. So the second part of the 4-part system is promoting sustainable recreation. So this is through improved signage, improved presence. We are rezoning the area to minimize the user conflict. And we are also executing a scientific study on sand management because there is the perception that certain areas of the bay are shallowing. And so we're trying to get an idea of how the sand is moving and then what options are available to the marine park to mitigate these changes. Next slide, please. So the impacts this has is that it's protecting what we already have. So Bonaire is in a very unique position compared to a lot of islands that we actually still have quite a lot of our original habitats. So we don't have to focus so much on the restoration. We can actually do more of the protection, the conservation, which is really a good position to be in. And we can, by implementing these, we can serve as a positive example of how you can balance ecological restoration, conservation with recreational use. Because what we don't want to do is tell people they can't come into this area, because we want to keep this area open to the public. We want people to enjoy what it has, but we also have to be realistic about the limitations to the area. And by doing this, we're going to improve the overall local and visitors' understanding and respect for the habitats, hopefully. All right, next slide, please. The third prong of our project is the improved enforcement. This is being done by having 2 rangers in the bay every day. This is already a huge improvement from where we've been in the past. Part of this project is to build these 2 watchtowers. So we're going to build 1 watchtower in the north, 1 watchtower in the south. This will be for the rangers to be able to improve their ability to patrol, but also be open to the public, so the public can go up and actually see the mangroves from above. And then below we'll have informative signs. So this is another point of contact with the visitor to give them more information about how important this area is. And the other part of this is improved ranger training. So every month, the Marine Park Rangers, there are 11 of them, they rotate through every day the bay. So every week, they're in teams of 3. So every week they have 2 to 3 days in the bay, but they're receiving flora and fauna training. So the idea is that they'll be better prepared for interacting with the general public. If someone comes and asks, like, why can't we go into the seagrass? They can explain how seagrass grows, what is in it, and just give them a better way of interacting with the public to help both improve the perception of the rangers on the island and also to make them more effective at enforcing the rules. And next slide, please. So we've already seen this improve local partnerships. So by bringing in local experts to teach the rangers, we already see these interconnections on the island. We see the rangers are asking really good questions. They're integrating aspects of other projects into their projects. We're already seeing that we are a small island, but we have a tendency to kind of get into these siloed into our areas of expertise. And this is a way of kind of bridging those gaps. And we see, and the rangers have had a difficult time with their public perception as seen as the enforcers. And so this is kind of lessening this, softening this, and we already see the public a little bit more willing to engage with the rangers. So even with less than a year that this has been implemented, we already see an improvement in the ranger public relationship, which we are very excited about. And then lastly, kind of the reality of the situation is we have a nature fee that everyone has to use to access the marine park. By having the rangers in the bay checking these nature fees, we are improving the compliance of actually purchasing the nature fee, which adds to the sustainable finance to continue this project moving forward. All right, next slide, please. Which brings me to the fourth and final prong of this project, which is monitoring the ecological processes. This bay does not have a lot of residential buildup around it, but we do have 2 hotels, 3 or 4 restaurants. We have a lot of we have kayak operators, windsurf operators. And so we do see that these establishments have issues with their septic tanks. There's a few establishments that are actually just the water is being dumped directly into the bay. So by actually, and this hasn't been monitored in the past. So by implementing a water quality monitor, we can pinpoint the areas of most concern, and this can help set a baseline of which we can improve our enforcement and help come up with a sustainable solution. So we can work with the operators to find creative ways to improve their septic tanks. There is government funding, so we're working with them to receive that. And then through this, we'll have a final report, which will serve as our baseline data moving forward. Next slide, please. And so again, this is working to improve our relationships with the operators because we're showing our willingness to help them improve their situation. And more importantly, this is going to improve the water quality for the bay, which has huge ecological importance, but also human safety implications. So this is also something that the general public is very excited to learn more about. And as a government, we are also looking to improve the conditions of the bay. Next slide. So that's the end of my presentation. Again, to just kind of show you that this project is a mixture of marine biodiversity with also sustainable recreation. So this is trying to find the balance there, which has been a bit of a challenge. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jessica. Definitely not the easiest task to balance out both economical and ecological needs in a country, especially one that you're focusing on an area that places such an importance on this recreational site that also plays a huge ecological role for the island. So I see that we already had one question pop up during your presentation, so we'll get to that in the Q&A session. Thank you for submitting that question already. Nice to see some, kind of follow-on and linkages with the project that Martin presented on as well. The role of education with the general public, with schools, and nice to see some addition on the conservation and restoration side that you spoke about, which leads us to our third presentation today by Renee and Natasha for the project in Aruba. So I'll hand over to you, Renee, to take us through that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, the Turning the Tide project. I'm based in the Netherlands at the moment, so over here it's almost 5 o'clock, but we work very closely together with our partners in Aruba, and one of our main partners is FP&A, of which Natasha is the director. We started our project last, I think on the, it was the 30th of January or 1st of February. So it's a very short while ago. So I'm basically presenting to you what we are going to do. Next slide, please. So first of all, what triggered us to develop this Turning the Tide project? Basically because of a lot of bad news stories. In Wageningen, where I'm from, Wageningen University and Research Center, we write reports for the Dutch government about national reports about biodiversity conventions like the Convention on Biological Diversity. And actually, we concluded in many reports that the state of nature in the Dutch Caribbean is insufficient, and for some islands is even declining, like for Aruba. There was also a study by Wolf's Company a couple of years ago on the economics and ecosystems of biodiversity, and that study concluded that the decline of marine biodiversity is so substantial that it will eventually result in 50% decline of welfare on Aruba. So it's also bad for the economy. Well, last but not least, there was a coral reefs baseline study for Aruba in 2019, carried out by Karmabi from Curacao. And in the upper right corner, you see one of the maps that they provided in the report showing the coral abundance along the southwest coast of Aruba. It should actually be green. That's what we hope for. That's what we aim for. But it's at the moment, it's basically a red, critical, or orange, yellow, poor. So the state of the coral reefs is not so good, and we want to do something about it. Next slide, please. And it's not just us, it's also the people on Aruba. You can start a restoration project, but if there's no local support, then you better don't start it. But if you look at all the policy notes from Aruba, then they recognize that they have a problem and that things should be changed. There's a time to turn the tide. And in 2018, Aruba government designated marine protected areas, of which FP&A is the manager. FP&A now developed also management plans for the areas. Next slide, please. But for getting things managed and restored, you need a budget. And I just showed you the picture of the condition of the reefs of Aruba. There's about 30-40 kilometers of reefs that needs to be restored. So you need a substantial amount of budget. So we were happy when we were noticed about the call for Resembit about marine biodiversity. It was about restoration of corals, mangroves, about sustainable fisheries, MPA management, sustainable financing, and education, all these issues in this call, we could apply them to our project. So we were very happy with this call from Resembit. Next slide, please. So together with FP&A, we thought, what can we do? What kind of project can we submit? Well, the overall objective of our project is, I'm not going to read these lines, but the overall objective is when we can start this project, at the end, the future looks bright again for Aruba. That's actually what the overall objective says. Specifically, our objective is to improve the management and have conservation and restoration of Aruba's mangroves and coral reefs within these new marine protected areas. Next slide, please. And we also knew, we cannot do it between the both of us, not just Wageningen and environmental research and FP&A. So we wanted to have partners. For us in Wageningen, it's easy. Our institute is at the campus of Wageningen University. So we wanted to cooperate with the marine animal ecology of of Wageningen. But we also wanted to have a counterpart for the university in Aruba. So we wanted to cooperate with the University of Aruba, but the University of Aruba told us, well, we don't really have a marine biodiversity faculty, but it turns out now that things are yeah, going really in the right direction, but I'll come back to that later. Wagner University is one of our partners, Aruba University is one of our partners, and we have Scubble Bubbles, that's an NGO that is specialized in education of the youth, and they also have a coral nursery, and we want to use those corals for artificial reefs. So we have developed the Turn the Tide project. We have 3 core activities. It's conservation and restoration of mangroves and corals. It's research and monitoring, because we want to know, does it work, the restoration? And of course, communication, visibility and outreach. So if we have a good story to tell, we want to tell the Aruban community, but also, well, we also would like to tell the world. Next slide, please. So I now go through these 3 core core actions. The first is about conservation and restoration of the coral reefs. In the right of the slide, you see a diagram. This illustrates the 2 negative spirals that are currently going on within the coral reefs. We've got decreasing coral coverage on Aruba. Due to that, there is a loss of the 3-dimensional structure. You've got more coral rubber, more coral rubble, more sedimentation, more turbidity, and that again has a negative impact on the remaining coral coverage. And yeah, this negative spiral just goes on. Then there's another negative spiral. Due to the loss of the 3-dimensional structure, fish lose their home. Also herbivorous fish that the coral reefs need to graze the algae. So if the algae are not grazed, it suppresses the corals, and again, it means a decrease in coral coverage. So we need to have a breakthrough. We need to have something to turn the tide for the corals. And we thought, well, then we have to come up with a 3-dimensional structure. So our intervention is to have artificial reefs, but not just any artificial reef, because there are a lot of companies in the world that, so to say, throw things in the water and call themselves an artificial reef manufacturer. But that is not what we want. We want these artificial reefs. They have to come up to certain criteria. They must have proven to be successful in practice. So they must attract corals. They must attract fish. They must withstand extreme weather conditions. They must be able to be manufactured locally, because we have 30-40 kilometers of coastline in Aruba. Well, I think the RESEMBIT program will not fund the whole coastline with artificial reefs, so we need to have something that is produced on Aruba. It must be easy to handle, because big ships and cranes are very expensive, and that's not going to work. So it must be altogether, it must be relatively cheap. Next slide. So we found 2 potential successful reef systems, and this is the first one. It's called the Mars Reef Stars, and actually this is a system that is developed by the Mars Chocolate Bar Company. They have earned quite some money, and they have set money aside for good projects. So developed within their Mars Sustainable Solutions, they developed this Reef Star, and they applied it in over 30 countries already. And yeah, you can see it is very simple. It's just an iron spider covered in sand that you can just find on the beach. And I'm now going to show you a picture that's from their website. Next slide, please. That shows you how it's applied in Indonesia. 2 minutes movie. Okay, next slide, please. So these people from Mars, they also provided trainings to our team in Aruba, yeah, to make sure that it's most successful. Then the other system we want to apply, it's a Dutch system. These are two guys, Max in the left and Jesse in the middle. And they were on the national news last week because they have implemented a big project in Kenya, where they also work with local communities. Next slide, please. The system they have is concrete, but it's not heavy. You can just bear it yourself, transport it in a fishing boat. The local people are trained to attach the corals from a coral nursery to the concrete modules. Already when they put them in the water, fish already find the tubes, the concrete tubes, and hide in there. And the picture in the right corner, it's they already had a test reef in the water for about 1.5 years, and you can see that it's already quite well covered in corals. So these two systems, this system, the Moses reefs, and the other system, the Mars reefs, we're gonna test those in Aruba and see which one works best, or maybe in the two together, maybe that they work well if you apply them together. Next slide, please. So that was about the reefs restoration, and then we come to the mangrove restoration. Well, this picture explains the problem with the mangroves. It's the sedimentation. This is a picture from last year after heavy rain. And you can see that due to unsustainable land use, a lot of sediment is getting lost. It's ending up in the sea or in the mangroves, and that is something that needs to be prevented. The loss of sediment. Next slide. So what we want to do is we want to trap the sediment, and actually that is already happening. We first thought we need to construct sediment traps, but here you see a picture from Google Earth, and you see that there's a coastal road, and the coastal road is already trapping sediment. You see in the middle of the picture, you see a rooi, is a kind of a dry riverbed, and you see a lot of bare sand, which is just piling up until the road. And at the other side of the road, you've got the Isla de Oro mangroves, not as big as the mangroves in Lac at Bonaire, but there's still quite some hectares of mangroves. And the mangroves are getting sedimented, so we need to do something about it. Next picture. This is also a sedimented area. It's a Spaans Lagoon. It's quite close to Isla de Oro. Yeah, here you can see the problem. You see the road, which acts like a sediment trap, but the sediment is not being excavated. So the sediment level is increasing, and at this point, it's not acting as a sediment trap anymore. So if there is new erosion, the sediment just runs through the tubes, and at the other side of the road, you can see a vast area of sediment, and in the back of that you can see also mangroves. But this is a big problem on Aruba. There's a lot of erosion, so we need to excavate that sediment. Next picture. Yeah, what we want to apply in Aruba is the system that they invented more or less on Bonaire. And I see Jessica, she laughs about it. I think that's the system, Jessica, that you invented on Aruba. Is the mangrove maniacs. They make channels again in the mangrove, so the fresh water comes into the mangrove again, and you've got you restore your nursery function of the mangroves. Next slide, please. So what we hope at the end that we also have fish spawning again in these mangroves, and that the mangroves strengthen the reefs that are just adjacent to these mangroves. Next slide. So those were the two restoration interventions, coral reefs and mangroves. But of course, we want to know whether it works, whether we are doing a good job. So we have all kind of activities under research and monitoring. We are training local scuba divers in global coral reef monitoring. And we do that especially with students from Aruba University. And we actually thought that we were a bit afraid that we would not have students because Aruba University does not really have a marine biodiversity faculty. But we now had, I think, 35 interested Aruban students. So we had to make a selection. And but I think we will have some 20 students in our project, where we thought if we have 6 we are happy, but we now have 20, and I think we'll find a place for them. So that is successful, the enthusiasm with the students. Then we have students from Wageningen as well, and we want to let them cooperate with the students from Aruba, so they learn from each other. We will monitor the restored reefs and mangroves. We will also monitor the perception of nature with the local community. How did they think about marine biodiversity before the project, but also after the project at the end. We want to explore innovative finding mechanisms because after this resembled project stops, we want to have more money for further restoration. For instance, you saw the huge amount of sediment, and that also has a value. So maybe we can think of a way to make that a profit for more nature restoration actions. And of course, this project will stop a year from now. And this is not where our partnership should stop. So we want to have at least a 5-year research and monitoring plan after this year. So we want to continue our cooperation. And Wageningen University and University of Aruba, they are already in the process to have an MOU. So they are willing to cooperate also in the future. So that's a good thing. Next slide. And that's my last slide. It's the communication, visibility, and outreach. FP&A organizes a lot of stakeholder engagement sessions. They always do that, but also in the light of this project, not just to inform the stakeholders, but also to ask their opinion. Like, for instance, where should these artificial reefs be placed? So the site selection. So they really have an opinion in that, and FP&A listens to them. Then we also want to develop a local documentary, a documentary that we can show in schools, but which FP&A can also show in their visitor center, for instance, for tourists. We want to keep the local media informed throughout the project. We already had our kickoff meeting. And you see also this picture from the kickoff meeting, and there was a lot of interest from TVs, local TVs. We will write news articles to be published on BioNews from DCNA, but also in the Netherlands, because this is our Caribbean backyard, and I think the Dutch people should know much more about it, because I think biodiversity over there in the Caribbean is much higher than the Netherlands. So we should educate the Dutch. And we will upload project outputs to our own project website and the Dutch Caribbean Biodiversity database, so it is accessible to anyone. So that's and a lot more, of course. But this is in short our project. We're now underway for 3 months, and we're gradually settling in. So I'm satisfied about how things go. So anyway, this was my talk, my presentation.
Thanks very much, Renee. I see that we have a couple of questions that have come in. Natasha, I'm sure you might want to jump in during the discussion as well. Before we get to the questions, just again to thank you all for these very rich and interesting presentations that you shared. There's always something new to learn, even for me. Like I know the projects inside out, and I work with you almost on a daily basis, but there's always something new to see and learn. So great to see that and be able to share it with the broader community as well. I've seen some reactions in the crowd, so to speak. Of course, a big thank you there. One of the reactions we saw, Catherine Jadot, who you all know supported us in the formulation and development of most of our projects in this portfolio as well. So nice to see you there, Catherine, as well, to see the fruits of your labors as well. I guess before we get into the questions, just a few kind of commonalities that I picked up across the presentations is maybe we want to talk about those as well as, the role of education in marine biodiversity conservation, whether it's going in at the school level or dealing with it at a public, tourist level, like we're seeing in Lac Bay or maybe even in Aruba, to not only quote unquote educate people about the environment and the need to conserve and protect it, but also to inspire people to really love the environment around them and to want to, intrinsically do something to protect it, as all of you are doing. So I think that's a fantastic initiative from all the projects, and we're certainly seeing it across a lot of the other projects in the ResInBid marine biodiversity portfolio as well. So one of the main issues and points that I picked out there, of course, finding that very delicate balance of, economic use of our environmental resources and being able to balance it between the economic value and the environmental value, and finding a way to equitably share those resources across all the different stakeholders who use them. Certainly it speaks to both of these issues, but the need for local ownership of whatever initiative is being done in a country to protect and conserve the environment. That's certainly a key role, and it's great to see things like we just heard in Aruba, where the university is getting involved, local NGOs are getting involved, and of course through FP&A's leadership and with Wageningen as well, getting to share those experiences among the different stakeholders, I think is critical. And yeah, we've also seen the reality and the very serious need for sustainable financing mechanisms to support all of these initiatives, because of course, nothing can get done without the money to do it, unfortunately. A lot of organizations were hard hit by COVID in the last few years, especially those working on environment. So really good to see, some sharing of experience on how you can potentially introduce sustainable financing mechanisms. So just some key takeaways that I saw. Of course, we had some very interesting points raised. I think let's get into some of the questions that we already saw in the chat box there. We have a couple from Manfred. First one was directed at Jessica, asking about whether you already did a carrying capacity of Lac Bay with respect to recreational use. I know that that's been discussed quite a lot, but Jessica, maybe you want to chime in a bit more on that?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and actually very relevant, because there is an ongoing carrying capacity study that is a ResInBid project. It's a ResInBid World Bank co-funded project that they've done all of the research gathering at this point, but the final report has not been published yet. So we will integrate that into our project as soon as that's made public.
Thanks, Jessica.
It's not as satisfying as an answer as I'm sure you would like, but it's in the process.
It is, and it is going to inform a lot of work that you not only do, during and after this project, but also going forward for the government of Bonaire and Stinapa as well, to be able to have, better information on how to structure their use and sustainable, recreational use of the area. I saw another question from Manfred, directed at Renee, asking whether you considered concrete settlement structures that have been manufactured as synthetic limestone. I know Renee did look at many different options for the artificial reefs, but I don't know, Renee, if you want to provide a short overview of that process as well.
Yeah, a short reaction. We discussed already with the guys from the concrete that make the concrete, and we asked them, please, if you're on Aruba, please also see or test whether you could make those blocks with the sediment from the sediment traps. If we want to scale up after this project, then we can use the material that is available on Aruba. So you don't have to import all kind of heavy and expensive stuff from abroad, but try to use the materials that are available. But the limestone, I don't know to what extent you have limestone on Aruba. Maybe Natasha knows.
Yes, thanks for that question. We do have limestone, but that would basically mean that you have to quarry it. And at the moment, we have 30 quarries on the island that we're trying to close. It is a huge issue getting building materials. So a lot of the limestone areas are protected areas as well, and that harbor a lot of unique species. So for us, it would not be an option to locally produce it, and the sustainability of it would on the island indeed be a great issue.
Thank you, Natasha. I see Martin nodding in agreement there as well. I know that's also a key issue in Cayman. So yeah, thank you for that, Natasha. Tony, another one of our implementing partners in Aruba at the Metabolic Foundation. Thanks for joining, Tony. I see you've got a question there for Jessica. Jessica, whether you're exploring anything with blue carbon stock or burial rate estimation or credits. Is that something that you're doing maybe in this project or other related projects in Bonaire?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is not part of this project, but it is part of a different project. Kind of pairing with what Renee talked about, we do have a mangrove project on Bonaire. In 2019, 2020, we did a study on estimating the blue carbon potential in the mangroves, and that's been released and is kind of serving as the foundation moving forward. And right now we're in discussion with an organization called Beneath the Waves. I believe they're also doing some blue carbon analysis for Aruba, but we are looking, and that will be focused in more in the seagrass. So this is also something that we're exploring as a parallel project to this Resembid project.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic to explore. We could do a whole session just on that. I think for a lot of people here interested in that as another innovative financing mechanism. Lots of different initiatives and views on that. But yeah, thanks for that, Tony. Very interesting question. I wanted to touch on the, all three projects hinted at some resources that are going to be generated and already are being generated through the projects. And Martin, I thought I would come back to you, and also Renee, you'd also hinted at it. You both spoke to, you have your websites that are dedicated to what you're doing on the projects and you share resources there. So Martin, to what extent do you see the replicability of the resources that you're generating in this project for other Caribbean OCTs as well to kind of adapt and use in their particular contexts? Martin, I think you're still on mute there. Is
that better?
Yes, thanks. There we go.
Okay. There's 8,000 little microphones flickering at me here. Anyway. Yes, absolutely. The way it's been structured, that is to be able to do exactly that. And that is our medium and long-term goal. We are working with BVI, with the Marine Lab there, to develop a combined program. We were hoping to do it next month, but because of the usual chaos, post-COVID chaos of trying to keep people longer than 5 minutes. They've lost some of their people, and we've rescheduled it for October, and that will be a combined project. From the English perspective, it's not a problem. It may just needs a little bit of localization, which most people can do, to plug in their mini ecosystems, their coastal ecosystems. We do have, I omitted to put the French Guiana cover on. I forgot all about it on my PowerPoint, but we have got the French version, and that's already being done for Marvelous Mangroves. That's already being done in a couple of the French islands, and we have a Dutch version which we did for Suriname. Is the Marvelous Mangroves, and so I can see the French version being easily expanded. I don't see the Dutch version being easily expanded, simply because their coastal ecosystem is so completely different to the islands, essentially dictated by what's happening up from Amazon outflow. But yeah, I can see it, and that's what we're aiming at doing. We are working, one of our partners in Cayman is a national trust. We work extremely closely with them, and we are tying in with the other OCT national trusts. And that's sort of, we've already started that process. But we had to get our resources off the ground first. Now we can keep adding to the resources. One thing I did not put in is that we have started a water quality research program, and that is collecting data from around the islands. And but it's still early days. We're waiting for a mega piece of equipment, which is being made in Germany. But that we'll be adding to that as we go along. And that'll be done by the rangers, and hopefully we're working with a couple of the high schools to. We've started already to do some research projects in the central mangroves. Again, we're pulling that together again, so that's something that is easily implementable elsewhere. So the template is there. It's the usual question of how are we going to pay for it.
Indeed. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I mean, as we said, the sustainable financing is always the biggest question involved in advancing some of these initiatives. You also touched on data generation, and actually, Tony, who just posed the last question as well on the project that they're working on in Aruba, is producing data that they're generating from low-cost tools that can be used to collect the environmental data that can feed into some of the environmental plans or other decisions that need to be made on the environment. So good to see some potential information sharing across those kind of initiatives. And as you mentioned, Martin, linking in with the National Trust Network, we of course have them across all of the UK OCTs. Some of them are working on projects within the ResinBid program, as you know. So it'll be great to see some of that, sharing of information and approaches. There's another education-focused sub-regional project that recently kicked off under ResinBid as well in TCI and Bonaire. See Jessica nodding. I think you know about it because Stinapa is involved as well. Where they're also, taking a similar approach, Martin, where they're developing, local knowledge on the local environment and be able to share that, and importantly, doing it in languages that all the local population use and understand. So underlying issue here is education, and it's definitely coming up a lot. So nice to see a lot of progress on that. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Do we have any other questions from anyone in the audience that you'd like to ask our panelists, or that our panelists would like to ask each other? See there, Renee? Yes.
Yeah, I maybe have a question. Well, when we were on Aruba, we also snorkeled the sites where we want to put the artificial reefs, and under the water we still saw three-dimensional structures from dead Acropora palmata. So we were wondering whether we could use those as well for restoration. And I was wondering, does anyone in the Caribbean have experience with trying to restore these Acropora palmata graveyards by using these dead structures? Because our specialist said, well, it probably doesn't work.
May I say something? This is
Yes.
Michiel
Yeah,
from
sure, Michel.
Curaçao.
Nice to see you. Michel is
Hi.
one of our partners in Curaçao, working on a
Okay.
Queen Conch project there. So I'm sure he's got something useful to add to that.
Yeah, I'm also working on. I'm also studying corals, and it's quite often you can see that Acropora palmata recolonizes in nature the old palmata structures.
Okay.
So it's happening. I can almost say all the time. But when you want to have real good information, you should go to Mark Vermeij of Carmabi.
Oh, Mark Vermeij, yeah, I know him.
But it's happening in nature all the time. So I also have some. I made some stop motion videos of it. How you can.
I don't know
see
if
that
it's happening
palmata.
on Aruba all the time, but not.
Okay,
Do you
that's
know?
pity.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen quite some nice patches of Acropora palmata, so I was very happy to see that it's not lost. Really massive patches of Acropora palmata, but I think, Natasha, we didn't see them on the palmata graveyards, regeneration.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
It was at the northern tip. There was still some left, but we didn't visit it there. Yeah.
I see.
I can send you a little video on how the palmata is recolonizing the old structures. I get your email address from Andrea. I will send you that little video.
Please, yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. I see Catherine, our marine biodiversity expert, has chimed in on the group chat as well, saying in her opinion, it would depend if there's a lot of algae growth on the dead structures and also of the water quality and coral larvae availability, which makes sense. Yeah. Thanks for that, Catherine. Okay, great. Do you have any other questions? There, Tony chiming in as well. Tony has seen dead Acropora in Bonaire collected together, but he's not sure if that's why it was being done. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, so I
Thank
can
you.
like kind of a little bit add on to that. I'm also not sure if that's what that was, but I do know that in 2017 there was an initiative to take like live coral and then epoxy it to the skeletons to see if it would grow. But the lab that was doing that, CIEE, was closed. So I don't know actually whatever happened to that. So that might be worth Renee and Natasha for you guys to look into, because I know that was something that was being done on Bonaire.
Okay.
So if I may add on to that, we just recently had a boat strike at the northern tip to one of our palmata reefs, unfortunately. And our local partner, NGO Scubble Bubbles, is currently trying to get the right permit to salvage what is left of the palmata and use those indeed as fragments for outplanting in our artificial reefs.
Thanks for that, Natasha. Thank you. It's great to see such a lively discussion and sharing of information here. That's great. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with some other project news or with the program, I'm sure you'll know we have our ResinBid website, resinbid.org. If you haven't already, please also download the app. We have it for iOS and Android, ResinBid application, and there we regularly send really easy to digest information and updates on the program, on the projects. So please do have a look at that. And if there's, there are initiatives or news that you would like to get out, please be in touch with our communications colleagues as well, who can definitely support with that outreach. I see, we're running almost out of our time now. So if anyone has any other questions that you'd like to discuss.
I would like to know, because I've been buried in making sure that our education programs are curriculum linked to the primary and to a degree to the high school levels. If anybody's doing that, anybody else is doing that, because to my mind, that's where we have to start. But I'm not aware of anybody actually doing it on a structural level like we do with the Ministry of Education here, and again, as I've done around the world with different agencies. So I'll throw that out there because I don't know.
Thanks, Martin. See, we may have some guests who might be able to chime in on that. If anyone. Manfred, we see you, but you're on mute.
Okay. This is Manfred van Veghel from Curaçao. I'm also the project manager of the Resembit Klein Curaçao project. But we have a organization called Green Kids here that is structurally doing something on coral reef education. I used to be on the board of Reef Care together with Paul Hoetjes years back. And we had a Kids for Coral program where we taught kids to learn how to snorkel. And that's still going on Curaçao at the moment. So that's over 25 years of that kind of experience, but that's not the high school level. I used to be a high school teacher locally, and I've developed the curriculum for science for the Dutch Caribbean, and we put stuff like that in there, but still the methodologies that are used are coming from the Netherlands, because they have to do an exam in the Netherlands, and there you have your problem. Yep. So there's no coral reefs in the Dutch teaching materials. So when I was teaching, we still had the freedom to do a little bit outside of the curriculum. And being a marine biologist, I took some of my students underwater. But given the current conditions within the educational department, there's absolutely a limited freedom to do stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. We have the same problem. The bureaucratic structure is, they're trying to strangle us, but we haven't been strangled yet. I know what you're saying. The other thought that I had was that what happened in Cayman is a couple of years ago, the year that COVID hit, the government here decided to introduce the British school curriculum, which of course doesn't involve anything tropical at all. But we were lucky that we were able to work with our education department to basically rewrite local resources and local connectivity to the British curriculum. So similar problem that you had with the colonial power telling you what you got to do.
Yeah, and it's absolutely possible, but you have to be very creative and then develop your own materials.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for that, Manfred. Thank you. Great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our time today. Unfortunately, it's been a really fruitful discussion. Thank you, everyone who attended and participated. Of course, thank you again to our panelists. It was great to hear from all of you and see everything that's underway with these three projects around the Caribbean OCTs. Thank you again to our donors, the European Union, who make this all possible for us, and Expertise France, the implementation partner for the program. I mentioned the website if you would like to get more information on the program, and as well as our app. And of course, you can also reach out to me. You all will be able to reach me through the link that you would have received for the invitation to this event. I'd be happy to provide you with more information and linkages with other people in the program. That's what we're here for. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens with all of these projects and all the others.
Andrew, a question popped into my brain. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, Martin.
Jessica, I would be very interested to know how your seagrass restoration is going and what methodology you're using. If you could send that over.
Yeah, absolutely. I will reach out to Andrea and get your contact information, and then we can continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. As you know, the session was recorded, so if you'd like to come back to the recording, it will be made available soon. If you have other colleagues or other people in your network that could benefit from it, please do feel free to share it. By all means, the point here is to spread the experience throughout the Caribbean OCTs to benefit as much as they can from this EU-funded program. So thank you all again. Wishing you all a good day, good evening to you, Renee, and anyone else based across the pond in Europe. Please watch this space for the next Community of Practice event that will happen later this year. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks, Andrea.
Bye.